Hello, everybody. This is Miss Peachy again from your WCA Biology A class, and we are back with another little overview of this lesson, Unit 3, Lesson 8, What's a Virus? So this is also a pretty short lesson. As a reminder, I will always remind you of this. There is a note sheet follow along that you can get from my website. You should access this, get it open, and have it in front of you kind of while you're going through today's lesson. So the first page in the lesson here is just kind of going through the vocabulary, and then we have our lesson on what is this thing called a virus. We've been talking about, the biology is the study of living things. So do viruses kind of fit within this study or not? So let's look at what a virus actually is. So we've probably all had a virus of some kind before. Obviously, the past year plus year, we've all been talking about one specific virus, and that is the uh, COVID-19 virus, coronavirus, that we've been referring to here, and everybody's heard a lot about. But, how do these things compare to the other types of organisms we've been talking about before? It's referred to in the reading as a microorganism, but then they go on to talk about it as really not being a living thing at all. So I'm not even sure if microorganism is the best descriptor for what a virus is. So a virus has genetic material inside of it, nucleic acid, which is DNA or RNA. It is then covered by a protein coat known as a capsid. And then some viruses have a lipid-based envelope called a viral envelope that surrounds the virus. According to the reading here, it says this viral envelope is taken directly from the host's cell membrane. So it steals part of the cell membrane and it encapsulates itself with it as it's, I assume, breaking out of the cell once it has killed the cell. So some viruses have this membrane, some viruses do not, and it kind of depends upon the virus. According to the reading here, especially viruses that infect animals will have this viral envelope. So we are animals, according to the biological definition. So then a lot of the viruses that affect us or infect us will have a viral envelope around it. And it mentions in the reading that the influenza has a viral envelope. The picture here showing this virus, this is a bacteriophage. Bacteriophages are viruses that infect bacteria. So even very small prokaryotic cells can be infected by viruses. I always think this one looks a little bit like a lunar lander or a gross spider of some kind. So this is a picture, looks a heck of a lot like the coronavirus here, right? It has kind of like that picture, have all these little things sticking out of them. So viruses use proteins to actually make their way inside of your cells. So they have these proteins attached to them, and they can, as they come to a cell will have proteins embedded in them as well. The cell's proteins are like the locks. The proteins on the coat of the protein coat of the virus are like the keys, and they've kind of learned to copy some of the locks and match the keys that are on your cells, and that gets them access into the cell. It kind of unlocks the doorway so they can have access into the cell. So then we have this little chart comparing the traits of bacteria versus viruses, bacteria being alive, viruses being probably not alive. It's kind of a debate, really. So as you can see, a virus can reproduce, a virus can evolve, and a virus does have DNA or RNA, so it has that universal code, but it is lacking a lot of other things. Viruses do not respond to the environment. They can be destroyed, by external means like putting bleach on something, but they don't actually respond to the environment. They don't change their behavior based on the environmental clues. They are not made of cells. Again, they are just DNA or RNA covered by a protein coat, which is a capsid, sometimes surrounded by this viral envelope. They don't use energy. They don't need ATP to function. And they do not grow and develop. There's just viruses. There aren't like some sort of stages within their life cycle or anything. They do reproduce. However, that's even up for debate a little bit as well because viruses do not reproduce on their own. The only way they are able to reproduce is by infecting a host cell. When they infect the host cell, they use the cell's own organelles to be able to make copies of themselves. And they do this in two different ways. They either can immediately start hijacking the host's cell and start right away replicating themselves, or they can actually incorporate themselves into your genome, part of your DNA, and then they wait. And as time goes by, your cells divide and make copies of themselves, and that viral DNA is passed on to the next generation cell. And over time, more and more of your cells have viral DNA in them. And then, oftentimes, in that situation, some environmental factor will trigger that virus to become activated. And at that point, you already have the virus kind of spread pretty much throughout a large part of your body because it's becoming active later. That actually happens with like the shingles virus. You get infected with that and you don't get sick, sometimes ever, but oftentimes for many, many years until you're much older do you end up getting shingles. So again, it can reproduce, but it cannot reproduce on its own. It only can reproduce with the hijacking of the host cell's kind of machinery that allows them to reproduce, or the organelles in the host cell that will allow them basically being able to transcribe and translate their own DNA. So DNA viruses use transcription and translation, and RNA viruses can just directly translate and make their own copies of themselves. And when they do make copies of themselves, eventually that causes the whole cell to lyse or break open and spread more viruses, which then go on to infect more cells, each one of them creating more viruses. So it's like exponential spreading of viruses. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That is the essence of what was in this lesson. Um, Go ahead and make sure you have that note sheet filled out, and I guess I will see you in the next one.